Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, and we're specifically going to talk about the new Ray Winninger announcement that he made at the end of D&D Celebration, which is 4 factors on what we thought was a new edition, which I am now clear is not a new edition. All right. So there was a little bit of a, me included, people thinking this was the announcement of 6th edition. It was absolutely not the announcement of 6th edition. I do think there was definitely some reason to believe it was the next 6th edition, and the fact that there is confusion surrounding this is not an accident, right? Like, I think Wizards of the Coast is incredibly incentive to be very careful about every bit of information that goes out, and that giving a full and clear view of what's happening, they consider that dangerous to their business model, and I'm not sure they're wrong about that. One of the things is a lot of people are like, why aren't companies more transparent? Well, every time companies are transparent, we, the public, take their words and use them as daggers to stab them back with it. It happens absolutely constantly, right? Companies should be transparent, but I definitely understand why they're not, because basically what happens with the internet today is every word you say is like, if it's even off skewed by 1%, there's somebody going to jump in the comments and say that's wrong, right? It's a national might be a global hobby. Like, somebody said something slightly wrong or more than slightly wrong on the internet, I need to correct that immediately, right? And the only reason I'm sensitive to it is I speak publicly, and I should get used to, like, the cost of speaking publicly is just people absolutely constantly saying you're wrong about everything. Like, it's definitely a national hobby, right? And fair is fair. I say when people are wrong too. Like, I'll actually do reaction videos and say this person is wrong. So, but like, you just got to understand, like, if you create any kind of public content, like, you will just have a parade of people just telling you you're wrong, and some of them are right and some of them are wrong, right? But it's like rain, right? If you publicly comment on the internet, you just got to get used to just an absolute parade of people telling you you're wrong, and it doesn't even matter what you're saying, right? Like, it's a constant thing, right? So I'm still doing this 7 or 8 years. I'm still getting used to it. Like, it's shocking to me how absolute much of a drumbeat it is. People like, you're wrong, right? Whatever, right? It is what it is, right? If anybody was ever afraid of being told they're wrong, they just won't speak publicly, which is incredibly common. There are tons of people who are like, I'm going to live in the comments, I'm not going to create content, which I get. I definitely get that, right? Okay, so, and by the way, I really, really appreciate the people who do both, who live in the comments and create their own content, because they have a concept of how difficult it is, right? All right, so, and I'm blessed to have a few of those. So, if you live in the comments, I appreciate that as well. It just realize it can be hard being on this side, just with the absolute parade of people just saying you're wrong on everything. I was wrong on this. I was wrong on 6th edition. It was not 6th edition. So let's get into exactly what it is. All right. So Ray Winninger said, so I'm going to call it the Dungeons & Dragons EvoVerse, right? And I'll tell you why I'm going to try to get this rolling, right? First of all, Dungeons & Dragons will never say Dungeons & Dragons 6e. They will never, ever, ever, ever say it. I'll tell you that right now. Last time we went down this, so they were like D&D next, right? And they desperately want to hide how many versions they have. I get that, right? Because it does get shameful. One of the most shameful out there is like Warhammer 40K. They're coming up on like 10 versions, and they have like a decade less time in than Dungeons. They have way more versions than Dungeons & Dragons and way less time, right? And it's shameful, because they are because every new edition, you are dragging your community over glass. It's brutal, right? All right, so what did Ray Winninger say? He said 4 key things about the EvoVerse, right? He said next evolution, next version, 2024, 100% compatible, okay? Now, that where I made a mistake was he said next version, I heard next edition, right? Next version is not a new edition. right? And if there was going to be a new edition, he would have said it, right? So this is not Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition. So I'm calling it. I was 100% wrong. I said that it would be 6th edition. I was wrong, right? And guys like Dungeon Craft, who said it would be 5.5, were right. Dungeons & Dragons, and actually Dungeon Craft got to do a great video where he said, I called it. It's 5.5, right? Now I don't think it's 5.5, but I get where he's going, right? And he was right, right? And I was wrong. So Dungeon Craft was right. I was wrong. We do the best we can to predict, right? But sometimes we get it wrong. This is not going to be 6th edition. This is going to be a new version. All right, so let's talk about that, right? So I think this is Dungeons & Dragons EvoVerse. Evolution version, EvoVerse. Dungeons & Dragons EvoVerse. So I think that's a great way to refer to this thing, and that's what I'm going to refer to it as, right? So Dungeons & Dragons EvoVerse is the 2024 new evolution version, 2024 100% compatible thing that's coming out, which I'm calling the Dungeons & Dragons EvoVerse, the 2024 EvoVerse, right? So what is it, right? So I do think it is very safe to think of it as 5.5. I think it's a very simplistic way of looking at it, and I don't think it's going to be 5.5. And the reason why is I think that Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro are incredibly savvy with how they handle Dungeons & Dragons. I know a lot of you disagree with that and think they're all a bunch of idiots, but I don't think that at all. I think they're very, very smart. I think they know how valuable what they have is, right? That it's 10 times, it has a value 10 times greater than anybody knows. Just like Dungeons & Dragons is Marvel in the 80s, right? Marvel in the 80s, everybody thought it was going to go out of business. It was almost bankrupt, but the reality is it was worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and nobody knew it. Same thing with Dungeons & Dragons, right? So that's my opinion. I know not a lot of people. I know my opinions are incredibly unique. I don't hear anybody on the internet saying what I'm saying, right? Nobody believes about Dungeons & Dragons what I do. I get that, right? I'm not unaware of that. It does not deter me. I'm used to standing in the field alone. All right, so let's keep going here. All right. So what is it going to be? So it is going to be like a 5.5. Is that going to be good or bad? It's going to be horrible. It's going to suck so bad, right? So here's why, right? 3.5 was for 10% of the audience who cared about the tiny little, nibbly parts, right? And what it was a massive cash cow for Wizards of the Coast. So I think this version is going to be just a cash rake, right, for Wizards of the Coast, right? And a cash rake for Hasbro. Am I angry about that? No, I am not, right? This isn't for customers. This is for the creator, right? Like, this is for the creator company. They're gonna rein in money, and this thing is, if it's gonna be 100% compatible, it will be utterly useless to anybody who's a really good dungeon master or dungeon player, right? Because it'll be so much the same. This will be reprint palooza. It is going to be an absolute suckfest. It is going to be very, very bad. Okay. Now there is one asterisk on that, and I'll give it to you in a minute. But why am I not angry with that? Well, if you ain't checked, right? We in the latte apocalypse. It started in March 2020. It is a mess. It's turned the whole world upside down. It masked every face. It stole everyone's identity. It made it hard to breathe, like both literally and figuratively. It's a heck fest, right? It is a burning heck fest. It is just utterly horrible, right? So with all that, it's just really, really bad, right? And honestly, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist, right? And I root for companies because they hire people and they make the world better. I thoroughly believe that, right? Like, I ain't no fool. I know what goes on in countries that aren't dyed-in-the-wool capitalist. Well, I know what goes on in every country in the world beyond us. And I honestly don't think there's a country in the world that's 50 yards close to us, right? Everybody. We look back to see everybody on the globe, period, right? When it comes to commerce and freedom and joy and everything, right? There's nobody, right? There's a couple countries, right, who don't have their own, aircraft liners and are running a lemonade stand that they call a country, right, and get uppity every now and then. So U.S. should do what we do. And we're like, man, taking you over for the country next to you would be like a weekend project, right? Like, we ain't doing what you do, right? Like, you're not a real country. You exist at the, at the leisure of your neighbors, right? Like, and so there's a couple countries in the world that look like they're doing better than us. But if you don't own an aircraft, if you don't own a fleet of aircraft carriers, next, right? Like, yeah, it's fun what you're doing with your lemonade stand. Like, we're a superpower, right? We got a few people here, right? So basically, Dungeons & Dragons, this thing, it is going to be a massive cash cow. And so that's the thing is, WotC and Hasbro got kicked in the teeth by the latte apocalypse, just like every other company on the planet. I ain't wishing on their downfall. I want them to do well. If they need a cash cow right now, they need a cash cow. That don't mean I'm going to buy it, right? But it does mean I'm not going to get uppity and like, right? I'm rooting for them, right? So if they need something to stay stable, I owe them, right? I have gotten so much more joy out of my Dungeons & Dragons dollars than I've spent money on so many other things and gotten so less joy than every Dungeons & Dragons product I've ever bought, that I owe them. So I feel like, hey, do what you're going to do to get through this horrible time, right? All right, next, here's the kicker. I also do have, here's the asterisk. This thing is going to be a suckfest. This 5.5, it is going to be horrible from 55 different directions, right? There's one possible saving grace, and that is the joy spike, right? Like, so while Beyond the Witchlight, it's a Fae book. I could give two rat tails about the Fae Wild, right? But it contained statted every major character from the 1980s Dungeons & Dragons cartoon, from XL1 Quest for the Heartstone, and the LJN action figures. I am so psyched for their ability to do this, right? So what could they do? There's a whole bunch of things that I would just pay ridiculous amounts of money to see in any book, and they could put them here. So here's one. Dungeon Master. Dungeon Master in the Saturday morning cartoon was Dungeon Master in the game, right? What if they could permission us to have a meta Dungeon Master in the game that actually quested the players directly? I would pay $150 for that, right? It might be 3 pages long, right? But I would buy it immediately, right? And here's another one. Kate Welch, right? What the heck happened to Kate Welch? She was supposed to be the chosen one. She was supposed to be the next design lead. I'm convinced of that, right? That is a Dungeons & Dragons mystery that I would buy if you even had 3 paragraphs that explained why she left. If you solved a Dungeons & Dragons mystery, right? Like, why did Kate Welch leave Dungeons & Dragons in 2020, right? I would pay or 2019 maybe even. I would pay a fortune to know that, right? Like, I would like $150 to solve that mystery. Here's your dollars, right? Done, right? And there's just, and I'm having trouble thinking of like what else you could do, but that's just 2 examples, right? And the thing is, there's 50 years of Dungeons & Dragons history. If they go back and they do 50 years of Dungeons & Dragons, you could just stat the actual characters from the show. If you would stat Hank and Eric and Diana and Sheila and Bobby and Presto and Uni, done. I pay $150 for those characters alone to be statted in an official book, right? And so, and trust me, I do not give 2 rats or care 1 ounce about some non-official source statting them, right? But officially getting them into Dungeons & Dragons and putting the big old, rubber stamp on Isekai, I'm down. And I think there's like 20 other things you could do. So if they jam a joy spike right in the heart of this thing, I'm there, right? And they can do it because they have that awesome history. All that's my opinion. Apologize for being wrong about 6E. It's definitely 5.5, right? And I call it the EvoVerse. What do you think? Do you think this is going to be as bad as I think it's going to be? Do you think there's what would be your joy spike, right? I'd love to hear. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.